This is the FitnessFest Podcast detailing the story of fitness professionals from around the world. Let's get to the episode. Welcome to the FitnessFest Podcast. My name is Tyler Valencia, and I'm the president of KIPS and Kettlebell Concepts. Today, we have a very interesting topic for myself and hopefully for everybody listening to this episode. We have Waylon Pahona, and he is going to speak about living on a reservation, health and wellness on a reservation. And personally, I just think this is a great topic for anybody with health and fitness in general, but different populations, different diversities, different areas within our country. We can always keep our eyes, mind, ears, and open to how situations differ. So I'm really excited to get this podcast going. Waylon, let's kick this episode off with you explaining your background in health and wellness.
So good morning, everybody. So my name is Waylon Pahona. I'm Hopi, Tewa, and Maricopa Pipash. So two of my tribes are from northern Arizona, and one of my tribes is just outside of Phoenix, so Laveen area. Currently, I just recently left my role as the director of the Fort Mojave Wellness Center, and I've been working in health and wellness for over 15 years. Worked as a personal trainer in Gila River in physical therapy. And so done that for 5 years, went off on my own and started doing some independent consulting, created a group called Healthy Active Natives, and it just exploded. You know, we started off with over 100 people, and now we are over 75,000 indigenous people who are in this group, you know, who enjoy posting and talking about their health and wellness. Something that I was working towards, just to give you a little bit of background of how I got into the field of health and wellness. I was always very athletic in high school, and I try to relate this story to everything and my life, because certain people get into exercise and wellness in different ways. Mine is kind of interesting because it's through the trauma that I was part of as a child. So growing up on the reservation, I grew up in Hopi, which is about 100 miles just northeast of Flagstaff. And it's the only town close to us. No, I take that back. Winslow. Winslow is about 70 miles, so that's the closest town. We have a small store. Certain parts of the villages still don't have running water and electricity, and they choose to live this way. I don't want people to think that it's part poverty, part culturally ways of living. And so I grew up here, and in a nutshell, I was sexually abused from the age of 6 to 9 years old. I've seen things that other children probably have never experienced, you know, in an urban setting in life. My father, he accidentally killed a 3-year-old child when I was 12, and I witnessed that. With that trauma, I've also had to revive my mom at 16 from attempting to take her own life. At 16 years old, my older brother and myself were giving mouth-to-mouth and CPR to my mother to help revive her. Thankfully, my mother lives today, and she is very healthy. But within that time, you know, having all of those things, what kept me going was sports. I played football, baseball, and wrestling. Those 3 sports kept me active in high school. I actually got a couple scholarship offers to play football and baseball. But rather than take up any of that, I left the reservation, moved up to Wyoming. I didn't want to be back on my reservation. I didn't want to be part of any of that, you know. All of that time helped me. And so I was a pretty good kid. I wasn't doing any drugs, alcohol, anything like that. The sports was my outlet. And so I spent a year up there, came back, started going to college. I was going to college for firefighting. I wanted to become a firefighter. Long story short, within that time, I got a job with the Gila River community. And then I was doing an internship as a youth coordinator. As a youth coordinator, when I started, this was back in 2004, I wanted to work with youth because at that time, when I jumped on board with them, there were 7 young ladies from the age of 12 to 16 who had all committed suicide. And so I really wanted to make an impact on those young ladies. So this all relates to my wellness. So you rewind back to my young years of going through all of that trauma, how I suppressed and blocked my emotions, and the things that I've been through was physical activity, exercise, sports. My younger adult life, I helped people. I started training. I started doing things for kids, helping with camps, youth camps, cadet programs, all of these things. I was working as a mentor for youth. And within this time, I gained a lot of weight. So I was going to college, and I was also an intern. And I gained over high school, I was around 175 to 180 pounds, but I got up to 260 pounds. And just to give you an idea of my body frame, I'm 5'7", so I'm a pretty short, stocky guy. So to add an extra 80 pounds to my body frame, I was very unhealthy. But I was suppressing my emotions by doing these things, helping these kids, but I was so unhealthy. Well, fast forward to 2007, and here I am still doing these great things with these kids and not helping myself. I went into a spiral of losing myself, and in 2007, I tried to take my own life. And with that, I completely needed to go to get treatment, to get support. I was referred to behavioral health, and going to behavioral health, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. And me, as a Native man growing up on the reservation, I didn't know that I could get post-traumatic stress. I thought only people who went to war, who were in the military, got post-traumatic stress. So I started getting therapy. In that time, I also had thrown my back out really bad. So I was getting physical therapy as well. And so with that, I started finally expressing myself. It was the hardest thing to do, to share, that I've been sexually abused, to share the things that I've been through. And I finally started feeling good about myself. And then I started also going to physical therapy. I started going to physical therapy, and I started feeling really good about myself. I was doing these little lightweight exercises with 2-pound dumbbells, and I was just, I really let myself go. And there was a flyer in the physical therapy, and it was for the P.F. Chang's half marathon. And I remember the Gila River tribe did a story on this guy named Bob Pablo. Bob Pablo was a pretty large man. He had to have been at least 300 pounds. And he done the P.F. Chang's, and I thought, man, if this guy can do the P.F. Chang's, then I can do it as well. Well, I told the physical therapist that I wanted to do the P.F. Chang's, and the physical therapist pretty much kind of just put me down, and he said, you can't do that. And he's like, that's torture on your knees, your joints, and he said, you're way too heavy to be doing something like that. And him saying that, it really pissed me off. And I'm like, no, I'm going to prove this guy wrong, because I was always an athlete. But there's an understanding that football, baseball, and wrestling, those sports, you don't really run. Yeah, you warm up, but then you practice for the skill of it, and you drill. That's it. Skills and drills are mostly what you do. And so I hated running with a passion. I use hate because, and it's a strong word because I really did dislike it. But you go back to my people in Hopi on the Hopi Reservation, they have won 26 state consecutive cross-country championships. Nobody in the country, in the nation, has won 26 consecutive. And here, my people, they're known for running. I actually come from a community, a village of that is, it's part of the culture to run. And here I am, not really embracing the running like my people. And so I started to really understand that it's part of our way of life as Indigenous people. And so I started, and I tell people that Westwood High School in Mesa, Arizona was my birthplace to wellness, because I would go to Westwood High School track every day and I would walk, and then until I eventually started running. I would lay down a stick for each mile that I would do, because I'm OCD about numbers, and sometimes I would forget. So then I created a system where I'd start with the inner lap all the way leading up to the fourth circle track to get my full mile, and then I would write it down. So I actually did my first half marathon on Westwood High School track. And so from there, I would, and I tell people that I use running as a metaphor for life, because we run from our problems. We run because we can't do things. And it's the same when you're in that situation. Can I get this mile? Can I get to the next mile? And then when you get it there, it's such an accomplishment, to where I actually didn't run the PF Changs. I ended up going and doing a 50K. And running became my medicine. It became my therapy. And sometimes I would run and I would cry. I would think about all the things that have happened to me. And then those endorphins would kick in, to where it's like, man, I'm doing this. I'm actually running, and feeling really good about myself. And so me always being active, I thought, I want to become a personal trainer and I want to help people, because I felt that on this journey, I learned to take care of myself. I learned to lose this weight. But in all honesty, it didn't come from the physical. It was a mental thing. So I got certified as a personal trainer, and I got hired in the hospital, in the clinic. The crazy thing was, I was this gung-ho personal trainer because I lost all this weight. I was doing these ultra marathon races, and I came in just gung-ho, this crazy, personal trainer that wanted to save everybody. And then I realized that people on the reservation weren't really ready for that. And I had to take a step back and understand that a lot of people, it's sad to say, but a lot of the people from my community and my Gila River community are still dealing with some healing, and I let people know this, and I know some people have an issue with it and don't understand, so what I'm trying to say is a lot of Native people in our history, were taken from their people. We were plotted in different places across the United States, which are now called reservations. We were also given numbers. So a lot of you guys don't know this, but I myself have two, kind of like a social security number. I have two of them. One of them is my tribal identity. And so I carry that with me in my wallet. I basically have two identities. Sad to say that there's only, I believe it's a dog, a horse, and Indigenous people who can say our blood quantum. Kind of crazy.
No, I'm just going to say that a lot of what you just shared, very powerful. Many times, got goosebumps listening. And for everybody that's listening so far, I would believe that they share the similar feelings right now that even I'm going through with this recording and this podcast, with just hearing, but also, thinking about how it relates to the mental state of physical exercise and what you're sharing now, even how taking this back to your community. I'm sure that all the things that you have shared already played into, not played, but, factored into these discussions you've had with people from your tribe, from your reservation as well. But please continue.
So, looking at this historical trauma, assimilation, the boarding school experience, a lot of our indigenous people were taken from their land, taken to speak English, to take away our identities, to cut our hair, to conform to Christianity, Catholicism, Mormonism, all these different religious, what do you call this? I'm trying to think of the word.
Different religious sects.
There's a word for it. For these organized religions, they were wanting to convert us, and so people don't understand that plays a huge part. And with the government putting us way in these remote areas, giving us food rations and giving us food that our bodies aren't used to, flour, lard, processed foods are still to this day affect us. And so I see a lot of people who don't understand that, and they say, well, you need to get over it. You need to get over, those things that the government did to you. But if I can put it in this way, imagine that my grandfather was whipped every single day of his life under a government system, under being conformed. Imagine that when he raises his grandchildren, what he's going to think is discipline. And so there's this circle and this pattern that we as indigenous people are still trying to break, that cycle of what they've done to us. And so there's these things that really play a huge part in our mental, in our health and wellness. And so for myself, to be sexually abused, to see these things, to be part of this, I had to break that cycle, and I had to learn and to love myself and to take care of my body. So going back to what I was saying, I was this really gung-ho guy who wanted to change people's lives, but I had to realize that everybody is just as broken as I am. So before, on my social media, I would post pictures. I would have no shirt on. I'd be working out. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to share this. And it really turned a lot of people off. So I changed that. And I started being more transparent with my emotions. I started sharing and expressing more of myself to let people know, look, health and wellness didn't come easy for me. I had to really fix my mind. I needed to fix my mental state, because for me, the overall superior thing to change to be healthy is your mindset. It's the driving force behind everything. And trust me, I know because of my trauma and what I've been through. So that's how I converted and made myself understand to be healthier. And so I started helping people in that way. I started kind of being transparent with my life and letting them know, look, I'm just like you. I've been through those problems. But I've made it. And so I share my story and I talk to people. I've traveled to hundreds of reservations to share my message, because as Indigenous men, we're taught in certain places, in certain tribes, I should say, we're taught not to cry. We're taught not to express and share our emotions. And so I've put myself out there enough to share and express those things. And sometimes when I would tell my story, I would cry. And to go to different indigenous people and elders come up to me and say, we're not taught that. But it was the greatest thing to see a man like yourself cry and share his emotions. And I've had several people who have told me, indigenous elders, that, this is what I've been through. I've experienced exactly what you have been through. And in the 70 years of my life, I've never shared this, but since you're sharing, I'm sharing this with you. And so just right there, that's a breakthrough for me to help people. Our wellness and our exercise is completely different from the urban life. And I feel that's where myself and seeing wellness, so I have both aspects. I can come into the world. I call it, and I hope people don't get offended by this, but I call it the white world, and how the white world sees health and wellness, and then going back to my indigenous ways of seeing how wellness works.
Yeah. And that is definitely why I wanted to do this podcast episode, seeing that, and I shared this with you off of this, that one of my family members works on a reservation in the Pacific Northwest, and yet I don't know much about individuals that live on the reservation. And I find it a disservice to people that when they don't try to learn more about other cultures, how other people live, and it just helps people understand each other more. And so this episode has been one that I've looked forward to, and why I've, really wanted to make sure we record this and get it out there, because it's a great story to tell. And already everything that you've shared has been, inspiring. And it's that mental aspect that you shared that I think, people listening can hopefully relate to, that you're sharing how you're relating to other individuals and your goal to help others and their health and wellness. Many fitness professionals do have a, goal that's the same, and being able to share those commonalities, even though they're not apples to apples, but to share their feelings. Those are things that people that are going through hard times will be able to understand your viewpoints and be able to hopefully then open up why they aren't able to reach their goals, and hopefully, help you can then therefore help them reach new goals. So it's really good stuff so far. Waylon, can you share with the listeners what it's like for health and wellness on the reservation? I know that you worked at a great facility out there at one of the reservations that you recently left that position. But can you share what that's like, and those differences?
So health and wellness on tribal nations, it's interesting. It's really hard to get people out of their comfort zones as far as I'll put it out there, like yoga, something. It's a practice that people are like, I'm not sure I want to try that, or I don't want to do it. So you really have to get people vested in and really understand. So how I try to get people to do things is going back to our history as Indigenous people. The miles we ran, hearing stories of our Hopi people running hundreds of miles just to go into town to watch the trains, or doing things in ceremony for days at a time and not eating, or so it's always the relation to the culture. Like, man, it's in our blood. It's us as Indigenous people that we've done these things. So in order for you to get out, think about it, incorporate, if you can think about those things and tie it to your health and well-being, you'll definitely get up, you'll definitely do something. And so having people really think of it in that way. Right now, there's some tribes that just, they run. I mean, they have this thing called Just Move It in Indian country. You can get up to 1,000 people that'll come to an event just to run. So a lot of it 5Ks right now, since the pandemic has hit, there are people that are now trying to get virtual runs together. So it's really cool to see that on social media that people are moving through virtual 5Ks, virtual 10Ks. So one thing that people do is run and walk. And it's a given that it's just part of our culture as Indigenous people to walk and run.
Nice. Yeah. I believe I even saw you participate in a run recently, and I liked how you even related that in your earlier background story with how that relates to your culture. Finding these things that relate to your culture and how you participate in them after. Although this is not I keep using this metaphor, but apples to apples. I do these things called the Highland Games, which are traditional Scottish games. And although I'm not Scottish, and my original intention was not to really do it for the heritage of my my in-laws, but that is part of the reason why the kilt that I wear, the tartan that I support at these games, is part of their family. I support their tartan, their family name on my tartan because it means something. I'm happy that I have that type of relationship that it shows a family. It's not just I don't want to say a random because that's a bad way to put it, but some individuals, they just buy a nice kilt the way they look, they like the way it looks, or it's a state that they're from. I'm glad that I have a family name that I'm representing with mine while I participate at these games. So, culture, go ahead.
Definitely. And to add to that, and just what you said, that kilt that you put on, it means something. It means more now that
Correct.
You're representing your family, right? It means more when you're doing the event. It's not just because you're competing. It's like, I'm a representation of these people or my people. And then it makes you want to work harder. Yeah. So that's exactly it. Time together to add the traditions, the mindset of, I'm going to do my family proud and I'm going to do it this way. So you made a good example of that.
Yeah. Thank you. You briefly touched on some of these topics with the, some of the barriers for individuals with health and wellness. And I like the mental aspects that you already mentioned, but can you talk about more about individuals living on the reservation and some of the barriers that they face when it comes to health and wellness?
I think so. A lot of barriers that I see is just lack of equipment, lack of some people have health and wellness centers. It's a given. A majority of tribes do have wellness centers, but you have to understand that you're dealing with a reservation that has one center for a radius of 100 miles. So not everybody can get to those places, to do their exercise. Not everybody can go just to what do they call it? A sports gym here, like 24-hour fitness or Lifetime. You only have one. So a lot of people do just rely on at-home workouts. I've noticed and seen that a lot of people now are using like rocks. Where I come from, there's a lot of rocks. So utilizing rocks to lift, to squat, to do presses with. So it's really cool to see those things come to light, because those are things that we've done years ago. And then, so basically a lot of it is just functional fitness. I know in the urban setting, you have people who are going off of that, promoting themselves in that way and as a functional or, primal movements, stuff like that. But Indigenous people have been doing that and they still continue to do that. There's no label to it, or it's just part of the way of life. So you do what you can to make those things as far as exercise and wellness. Some tribes are healthier and some tribes aren't. It just depends on also education on people supporting people being healthy.
Yeah. Good insight right there. And I would say that it's in my opinion, it's cool to hear what using what they have around them, and how you mentioned that is, I'll say, a resurgent thing these days with health and wellness, utilizing rocks, stone lifting, and that type of exercise. While it is still a small population that does it, it's something that it works, and it utilizes many of the muscle groups and things that what people want to accomplish. They just don't know about them yet. So to hear that that's part of some people's routine already, that's it's great to hear. It's really great to hear. And I think that an aspect that many people can relate to listening to this with the mental aspect, but even specifically with men, and I think you briefly touched on it before with the way that you shared some of your background, your story, and how many, I'll say, men specifically can admit that they were not living a healthier life, but they do want to get better and can reflect on that. That mental reflection part, I think, is so important to understand where you've come from, the time that it takes, and where you want to go with your health and wellness, and you willing to share those items. I think it's a big thing. It's a very big thing that is something that hopefully men that listen to this, that they can understand that I need to make this change, and it's okay that I didn't live the healthiest life before, but let's make that change. Let's actually do. I think that is always the hardest step to starting something. It's that first step.
Definitely, and it is, and it's hard. It's hard for a man to really share and express himself in that way, especially an Indigenous man who doesn't want to seem unwarrior-like or doesn't want to show that side of himself, And so that's where I've come in to really express and show it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to do these things. It's okay to have these feelings and express yourself.
Something you just mentioned there that would be great to expand on a little bit is, would you say that the warrior mentality is something that's expected almost of men?
Yeah, I think the warrior mentality in certain tribes is expected in some men. And so it just, because there's, don't quote me on this, but I know it's close to 570 indigenous recognized tribes in the United States. I want to say 577. What a lot of people don't understand is we all have different teachings. We all have different mindsets of how we should be in a matriarchal or a patriarchal society. So we might look alike, but we all don't. We all didn't grow up with teepees. Some have houses, some have hogans, some have underground pits. There's just so many cultural differences when it comes to Indigenous people. So yeah, I'm not sure that a lot of people know that either.
Yeah, definitely. With health and wellness, and the individuals that you are working with at the Health and Wellness Center before, at that position, did you feel like that it was a good percentage of the people living on that reservation were coming to the facility?
So with the Fort Mojave people, I have to say one thing, that they are pretty active. They do, like, they were coming out to our center. I think the hardest thing for me was coming into that space, being of a different tribe. So I had to really kind of culturally engulf myself into them, the things that they did there, the events that they had in their community. I had to really show them that I was part of them, because, I think for every tribe, we're all hesitant and resistant to outsiders, and it's part of that cycle, it's part of that trust that we have, and so that took a while, but it was awesome to work with the people there, and it's good to see. You get a different perspective, because they're nowhere like my Hopi people, or they're nowhere like my Gila River people, but there's always some kind of common ground that we have.
Interesting. Very interesting. And I would say that that's a big difference. Well, you have shared things that I've correlated in my own experiences from working at different facilities. I would say that that's one aspect it's very interesting to consider for people listening, that personal training in general, I will say, is a lot of building relationships, building that connection with the individual to ultimately get them to go past the barriers that are stopping them from achieving
Definitely.
a healthier life. And this, I'll say, specific example of from tribe to tribe even, and you building that trust, I think that is such a unique aspect for the listeners.
Yeah. And I'll put it this way. It doesn't matter if you are, you could win hundreds of awards for personal trainer. You could be a personal trainer to the stars. You could win personal trainer of the year nationally. That does not matter on tribal land. You have to make a connection with the people. And that's basically it. Having an understanding, to be culturally understanding. And that's, those are the differences.
Yeah. From what this is probably the closest example that I can find in, we'll call it the mainstream fitness world, is I have an instructor that works with me that her audience is stay-at-home moms. So she knows that, and she, caters to that. That's her branding. And, that's part of how she develops her exercises, her routines. And that's probably the closest thing that I could relate to it. But still, that there's so many differences to consider with this specific topic. Waylon, with your experiences so far, with health and wellness, what are some of the goals that you have for the future with potentially implementing more health and wellness programs?
I think it's overall, it's just a constant battle and constant fight to continue to have people believe in themselves, to understand as Indigenous people, we are powerful, we are strong, we've overcome so much, and we will continue to overcome. I don't want to make this political or anything, but with just the racism and everything that's going on now, just to understand that we still need to continue to fight to be who we are. But with that fight for us, that has to also encompass our well-being as far as our health.
Yeah. Good stuff. Really good stuff in this episode. Waylon, we're going to wrap this episode up. I really appreciate you sharing all this information. As I said already, having you on was something that I've been looking forward to. You sharing your story and sharing more information about individuals that live on the reservation. It's so important, I think, for anybody, not just health and wellness individuals, but anybody, the general population, to tune in, listen to, and really start to learn about each other, their situations, their their upbringing, and it really just starts a great conversation. So Waylon, thank you for coming on the FitnessFest podcast.
Thank you for having me.